Assalamu alaikum. So today we're going to start with our tafsir of Juz Amma, or the 30th or last juz of the Quran. This is a very popular juz. A lot of us like to memorize it. The ayat are very short, and a lot of the surahs are very short. So I thought it would be very beneficial if we can go over it in detail so we can also understand the meaning of it. So we're going to start with Surah An-Naba. So the first two verses are what we're going to try to cover in this video. So the first verse says, Amma yatasa'alun. And this means, what are they asking about? But if we want to break this down further, amma is a composition of two words. It's a composition of an and ma. An roughly means about when you use it with a verb for asking a question. So when you say sa'ala an, it means to ask about something. And the word ma means what. So here it's saying, about what are they asking? But the way that we express it in this verse, we drop the alif and we combine them together in one word. And we say, Amma yatasa'alun. About what are they asking? And perhaps this way of phrasing it, there's an additional emphasis to it. Because it's one of the principles of Arabic, and especially in the Quran, that the word order of a sentence matters. So what you bring forward in the sentence tends to be more emphasized. So by bringing this forward and saying amma yatasa'alun, it's like you're saying, about what? About what are they asking? Right? So it gives it a different feel. Amma yatasa'alun. And then the next verse, anin naba'il azim, about the great news, about the great naba. Now, what is the great news? That's what we want to talk about in this video. But first, we want to discuss the meaning of the word naba, because it's very important to distinguish, because there's another related word, which is khabar, or information. So there's discussion about what is the difference between naba and khabar. What does it mean to get news versus what does it mean to get khabar, loosely translated as information. So we'll try to talk about that, inshallah, in this video, and we'll also try to talk about what is the meaning of the great news, an-naba'ul azim. So first, let's look at a couple language meanings for the word naba, some of the root meanings in the Arabic language. So number one of the meanings is al-ityanu min makanin ila makan, which means to come from one place to another. So naba is something that comes to you from another place. Now, I don't think that it literally has to come to you from another physical location, but that's part of the linguistic root. I think perhaps the idea of that is it's coming to you from somewhere else, and it's something that you are previously unaware of. And what supports that point language-wise, that is something that you're unaware of, is in Arabic, for example, if we say naba'a alayhim, someone naba'a upon them, it means hajama wa tala'a. It means they like came upon them or attacked them like in an unexpected way, right? And also in Arabic we say an-nab'a means a sawtul khafi. An-nab'a, so if we say an-nab'a, which comes from the same root as naba', it means a hidden sound or voice. So naba' is something that comes to you from somewhere else, and it's something that was previously unknown to you. So when someone brings you naba', it means they're bringing you some news that you weren't previously aware of. Now let's look at a few of the verses in the Quran to support this meaning. So if we start with 27:22, we'll start with chapter 27, verse 22. And chapter 27, verse 22 is talking about Al-Hudhud, which is in the story of Sulaiman. So here he says, فَمَكَثَ غَيْرَ بَعِيدٍ فَقَالَ أَحَطْتُ بِمَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ. So he stayed not far away, and he said, I have encompassed what you did not encompass. وَجِئْتُكَ مِنْ سَبَإٍ بِنَبَإٍ يَقِينٍ. And I have come to you from Saba with naba'in yaqeen, with certain news. So notice, first he tells Sulaiman, I have encompassed what you did not encompass. And then he tells him, I have come to you, so coming from another place, with naba'in yaqeen, with certain news. So I'm coming to you with news that you was from another place, and I encompass what you did not encompass. So it's something that you didn't know about. So that this verse is a good starting point, because I think that supports the language definition, that it's something that comes from another place and it's something hidden, meaning it's something you weren't familiar with. Another verse that we can look at is chapter 66, verse 3. So many verses, actually. That's what I was kind of looking at, which one I wanted to go to next. Because there's a lot of verses that use the word naba that could help us clarify the word naba. So 66:3 is interesting because it uses naba in a couple of different ways, and it also uses the word khabar. So he says, وَإِذْ أَسَرَّ النَّبِيُّ إِلَى بَعْضِ أَزْوَاجِهِ حَدِيثًا. And when the Prophet made secret to some of his wives a hadith, some speech, or some talk, he said, فَلَمَّا نَبَّأَتْ بِهِ. But when she informed about it, she gave naba about it. So think about that. He told her something privately, in secret, and she gave naba about it. She told people about it. She gave news about it. So it was something that they weren't aware of, that she was aware of. Follow me? So that supports the idea of what naba is. وَأَظْهَرَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. And then Allah made him become aware of it. عَرَّفَ بَعْضَهُ. He made known some of it. وَأَعْرَضَ عَنْ بَعْض. And he turned away from some of it. فَلَمَّا نَبَّأَهَا بِهِ. Then when he informed her of it, right? Because she's not aware that he knows about it. So now he's given her naba of something she didn't know. قَالَتْ مَنْ أَنْبَأَكَ هَذَا. She said, who informed you about this? Who gave you naba? How did you come to know this news that you weren't aware of? And then he said, قَالَ. He said, نَبَّأَنِي. Who informed me, who gave me naba, is Al-Alim Al-Khabir. Nabba'ani Al-Alim Al-Khabir. That the one who has knowledge and khabar, the one who has the information, the one who has ilm and khabar, the one who has knowledge and information, is the one who informed me, gave me the naba. So that shows us, so this supports some of the language definition that we talked about, but also this shows who is it suitable or appropriate to get naba from. Because as we'll see from one of the verses that we're going to read, not all naba is connected with knowledge. Like someone can give you news of something you weren't aware of or you weren't familiar with, but they don't necessarily do it with knowledge, right? So who is the appropriate person to get naba from is the one who has ilm and khabar, the one who has knowledge and information. So let's look at a couple other verses. So if we go to 33:20 is the next verse that we're going to look at. So in 33:20, he tells us, in 33:20 he says, يَحْسَبُونَ الْأَحْزَابَ لَمْ يَذْهَبُوا. They thought that the Confederates had not yet left or gone. وَإِنْ يَأْتِ الْأَحْزَابُ. And if the Confederates did come, يَوَدُّوا لَوْ أَنَّهُمْ بَادُونَ فِي الْأَعْرَابِ. They would love if they were staying in the desert amongst the Bedouins. يَسْأَلُونَ عَنْ أَنْبَائِكُمْ. Asking about your anba, about your naba, about your news, because you're somewhere else. So they would wish that they were far away from you so they could ask from a distance about your news. Another verse that we're going to go to is 35:14. So in 35:14, he says at the end of the verse, وَلَا يُنَبِّئُكَ مِثْلُ خَبِيرٍ. And none can give you naba like a khabir. So that is similar to the last verse where he said, نَبَّأَنِيَ الْعَلِيمُ الْخَبِيرُ. The one that gave me naba is the one who has knowledge, and the one that is al-khabir, the one who is well informed, has information. So he says here, none can give you naba like a khabir. So none can give you naba like the one who has precise and accurate information. And so this verse is a starting point also to understand the difference between naba and khabar, which we're going to talk about more, but I just want to point that out briefly. Another verse that we'll go to is 9:64. So in chapter 9, verse 64, he says, يَحْذَرُ الْمُنَافِقُونَ أَن تُنَزَّلَ عَلَيْهِمْ سُورَةٌ تُنَبِّئُهُمْ بِمَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. Al-munafiqun, or the hypocrites, are vigilant or aware or cautious or fearful. That's all the translations that I would give for yahdaru. أن تنزل عليهم سورة, that a surah would come down upon them, تنبئهم, informing them, بما في قلوبهم, giving them news about what is in their hearts. So something hidden, something that they're trying to hide, giving naba of that, bringing that out. Another verse is chapter 10, verse 18. So chapter 10, verse 18, he says, قُلْ أَتُنَبِّئُونَ اللَّهَ بِمَا لَا يَعْلَمُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَلَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Say, do you give naba to Allah, or do you inform Allah about that which He does not know in the heavens and the earth? So you see the usage of the word naba. Do you give naba to Allah about something He does not know? Because naba is something that has to do with someone not knowing something, right? And then the next verse we're going to go to is 13:33. So 13:33, he says something very similar. He says, أَمْ تُنَبِّئُونَهُ بِمَا لَا يَعْلَمُ فِي الْأَرْضِ أَمْ بِظَاهِرٍ مِنَ الْقَوْلِ. Or do you give him naba, do you inform him of that which he does not know in the earth, or بِظَاهِرٍ مِنَ الْقَوْلِ, or with something that's dhahir of speech or of the statement. So again, we see the word naba used in a context of someone not knowing something. Another verse that we're going to look at is 6:143. So 6:143 is an interesting verse because this supports some of what I mentioned a couple minutes ago. He says at the end of this verse, نَبِّئُونِي بِعِلْمٍ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Give me naba, or inform me with knowledge if you are truthful. Give me naba, or inform me with knowledge if you are truthful. So that shows that you can be given naba without knowledge, because he said, give me naba with knowledge. And so when we connect this to 49:6, so put these together, right? In one ayat he said, نَبَّأَنِي الْعَلِيمُ الْخَبِيرُ, the one who has knowledge, and al-khabir, the one who is well informed, is the one who gave me naba. And then in another ayat he said, وَلَا يُنَبِّئُكَ مِثْلُ خَبِيرٌ, and none gives you naba like al-khabir, or like a khabir, someone who has information or is well informed. And here he said, نَبِّئُونِي بِعِلْمٍ, inform me with knowledge. So in one verse he put al-alimu al-khabir, ilm khabar, together with naba. And then in one verse he put khabar by itself. He said, وَلَا يُنَبِّئُكَ مِثْلُ خَبِيرٌ, and none can inform you like a khabir. Excuse me, my throat's getting dry a little bit. And then in this verse he tells us, نَبِّئُونِي بِعِلْمٍ, excuse me, inform me with ilm, with knowledge, right? So that shows that accurate naba, accurate news, should be news that's connected with ilm and khabar, with knowledge and information. Okay, so the next verse we're going to go to is 49:6, as I was saying, because this connects everything together, because he tells us, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِن جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَأٍ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. O you who have believed, if there comes to you a rebellious, sinful person with naba, with some news, فَتَبَيَّنُوا, then seek to verify it. And that makes sense, because he told us in the verse that we were just on, 6:143, نَبِّئُونِي بِعِلْمٍ, give me naba, or inform me with knowledge, right? So you can be informed or be given naba without knowledge. So therefore, when a fasiq comes to you, you have to verify it, because the naba could be with knowledge or without knowledge. Another verse is chapter 3, verse 49. And this verse is about Jesus, and he's mentioning an ayah, something that would be an ayah. And so in this verse he says, وَأُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا تَأْكُلُونَ وَمَا تَدَّخِرُونَ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ, and I give you naba, or I inform you of what you consume, so what you eat, وَمَا تَدَّخِرُونَ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ, and what you store in your homes. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. And that is a sign for you if you are believers. So he says, a sign is that I give you naba. So I give you news about what you eat and what you store in your home. So something that I shouldn't be able to have information about. Another verse is chapter 9, verse 94. So chapter 9, verse 94, he's talking about people that don't want to participate in the battle, and so they make excuses. And so he says, يَعْتَذِرُونَ إِلَيْكُمْ إِذَا رَجَعْتُمْ إِلَيْهِمْ. He says, they make excuses to you when you return to them. قُلْ لَا تَعْتَذِرُوا. Say, do not make excuses. لَن نُؤْمِنَ لَكُمْ. We will not believe you. We will never believe you. قَدْ نَبَّأَنَا اللَّهُ مِنْ أَخْبَارِكُمْ. Allah has gave us naba from your akhbar. Now this is another verse where naba and khabar are in the same verse. And also I think this supports helping us understand the difference. Okay, so look at this verse really carefully. They're making excuses. So they're trying to give reasons that are not the real reasons why they wanted to stay behind. So when you return back to them, they give you these excuses. And then it said, قُلْ لَا تَعْتَذِرُوا. It said to us to say, do not make excuses because we will never believe you. Why? قَدْ نَبَّأَنَا اللَّهُ مِنْ أَخْبَارِكُمْ. Because Allah has given us naba of your akhbar, which is the plural for khabar. So Allah has given us naba of your akhbar, your information. So here, information, akhbar, seems like the reality, like the true reality and knowledge and information about what you really did and why you really stayed behind. So this verse helps us to see the difference because they're giving excuses, but Allah informed about their akhbar. So the akhbar is the reality of their affair, the reality of the information related to them, right? And that's potentially why in the other verse that we looked at, it said, وَلَا يُنَبِّئُكَ مِثْلُ خَبِيرٍ. And none will give you naba like someone who is khabir, someone who is well informed, or someone who has accurate information about whatever it is that you need naba about. So whatever field, whatever thing it might be that you want naba or news for, the one who can give you naba is the one who is khabir. Like no one can give you naba like a khabir, like someone who has all of the khabar, all of the accurate information about that particular thing. Also, if we go to chapter 12, verse 15. So chapter 12, verse 15 is about the story of Yusuf. So he says here, فَلَمَّا ذَهَبُوا بِهِ وَأَجْمَعُوا أَن يَجْعَلُوهُ فِي غَيَابَةِ الْجُبِّ. And when they left with him, and they all agreed to throw him into the bottom of a well, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِ, and we inspired or revealed to him or inspired to him, لَتُنَبِّئَنَّهُمْ بِأَمْرِهِمْ هَذَا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. You will certainly inform them or give them naba of this affair of theirs, وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, while they are unaware of it. See the meaning? That you give them naba while they are unaware of it. And another interesting verse that we want to go to is 5:105. So chapter 5, verse 105 is going to bring another interesting dimension to this discussion. So chapter 5, verse 105, he says, at the end of it, he says, إِلَى اللَّهِ مَرْجِعُكُمْ جَمِيعًا فَيُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. To Allah is your return, all of you, and He will give you naba of what you used to do. So how is it that we're saying naba has something to do with news or information that a person doesn't know about? But here Allah is saying He'll give you naba of what you used to do. Didn't you know what you used to do? So two possible explanations to that, at least two that I can see. One is it's potentially we don't know the reality of what we did, so Allah is gonna give us the naba, the true naba of what we did. And also we can forget what we did because Allah says, Nasullah fa'ansahum anfusahum. They forgot Allah and He caused them to forget themselves. So that's one potential way to look at it, right? But also, if we go to another surah, so let's go to 41:22. So 41:22 says, at the end of the verse, He says, وَلَكِنْ ظَنَنْتُمْ, however you thought, أَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَعْلَمُ كَثِيرًا مِمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. You thought that Allah did not know much of what you used to do. See how they fit together? So in one ayat He says Allah is going to give you naba of what you used to do. And then in the other ayat He said, you thought that Allah did not know, right? You thought that He didn't have the naba, but He does have the naba, and He will give you the naba of what you used to do. So it's so beautiful how those fit together. So with that said, so that's about naba, right? So let's talk about, even though we've already pretty much talked about it, but let's talk a little bit more about the word khabar and discuss some of the meaning of that and how that differs from naba, even though we've already kind of touched on it as kind of side points in some of the verses, right? The first interesting thing I want to point out is that one of Allah's descriptions or names is Khabir. Khabir, the well-informed or the all-informed. So that in and of itself, I believe, starts to show the difference, because Allah doesn't call Himself, He uses the verbal formulations from the word naba, giving news, like He says, like the verse that we just went to, one of the verses that we went to, that He will inform you, He will give you naba of what you used to do. But He doesn't make a noun from it and call Himself something related to the noun of naba as a name for Himself, okay? But He does call Himself khabir, right? And in fact, the vast majority of the usages of the root kha, ba, and ra, or for those that might not know the Arabic letters, K, H, B, and R. So the root word for khabar or information, the vast majority of the usages of that root word in the Quran is for the description khabir, which mostly applies to Allah in most cases. I would say there's at least 2 cases, and Allah knows best, that I would think could apply to other than Allah as well as Allah. Like the one verse that we read, وَلَا يُنَبِّئُكَ مِثْلُ خَبِيرٌ. Perhaps there He's stating a general rule that none gives you naba like a khabir, like someone who is well informed or has the khabar, right? Which applies to Allah, but also applies to anyone in any discipline that is well informed or has expertise about a particular thing. Another verse that could potentially apply to Allah, but also to other than Allah, is in Surah Al-Furqan, where He says, Ar-Rahman, fas'al bihi khabira. Ar-Rahman, so ask about Him a khabir. Ask about Him someone who is well informed. So I think that's the first important thing to distinguish between these two words, is that the fact that Allah calls Himself khabir seems to suggest or support the idea that the idea of khabar is accurate and real information. But let's look at a couple different Arabic meanings for this word, or Arabic usages for this root word. So, for example, if we say in Arabic al-khabra, that means qa'in mustadir yajtami'u fihi al-ma'. That means like a lowland or a plain or a riverbed which water gathers in it. So it's like something sunk in, or a lowland which water can gather in. We call that al-khabra, right? So one scholar gave what he called al-ma'na al-mihwari, the pivotal meaning of this word, where he said it means wusulu rakhawa ila umq al-shay' aw rakhawatu shay' bihaythu yusilu ila umqihi. That it is the softness or the tenderness of something that reaches to the depths of something. So it goes into the depths or the softness of something such that it reaches to its depths. So it seems to have the idea of something being malleable or soft and something that can go sink down into something. And so perhaps that's why when we say, for example, in Arabic, we say khabartu al-amr. So about something, anything, al-amr, some situation, some affair, we say khabartu, we mean araftuhu ala haqiqatihi, that I came to know this thing according to its reality, ala haqiqatihi, because from the linguistic meanings is to sink down into something. So perhaps that's why we use that. Khabartu means araftuhu. I knew it ala haqiqatihi. I knew it according to its reality because I was able to go into the depths of it, right? So perhaps we can say from that khabar is to know the real information about something, the true information about something, whereas naba is simply news that comes to you and it's something you're not previously aware of, and it could be accurate, it could be not accurate, and that's why wala yunabbi'uka mithlu khabir. Someone who is khabir and has the accurate information is the one can give you naba, or should give you naba, or no one gives you naba like that person. Or nabbi'uni bi'ilmin, give me naba with knowledge, because naba is just simply something you're not familiar with. And also about khabar, if you look, for example, at the story of Musa with his teacher. His teacher asked him, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا, and how can you be patient about that which you have not encompassed khubran, in accurate information. And also about the earth, Allah says, يَوْمَئِذٍ تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا, on that day it will speak about its akhbar, its information, بِأَنَّ رَبَّكَ أَوْحَى لَهَا, because its Lord inspired it. So the information that it will speak about will be the result of its Lord inspiring it. So it seems like that's going to be accurate information. So now the next thing that we want to talk about is يَسْأَلُونَكَ, or عَمَّ يَتَسَاءَلُونَ, about what are they asking? عَنِ النَّبَأِ الْعَظِيمِ, about the naba that's azim, the great news. So now that we have some idea of the meaning of naba from the Quran, from Arabic, and the difference between that and khabar, what is the great news? So there are different opinions about this. But I want to give you, Allah knows best, what seems to be a pretty good conclusion from the Quran itself. So if we go to chapter 38, verse 67, he says here, قُلْ هُوَ نَبَأٌ عَظِيمٌ. So 38:67 says, say, it is naba'un azim, it is great news. Okay, so we find the concept of great news in chapter 38:67. Now, looking at this chapter as a whole and looking at the theme of the chapter as a whole, I think that can help us to see what is the great news. So what is the idea of this chapter and how does this chapter start? If we go back to verse 1, he says, Sod, so this is 38:1, he says, Sod wal Qur'ani dhi dhikr. Sod, and by the Qur'an, which is full of reminder. Sod wal Qur'ani dhi dhikr, by the Qur'an, which is full of or possesses dhikr. So this surah starts off talking about the Qur'an and specifically about the characteristic of the Qur'an being the dhikr, something that possesses reminder. And what's the last two verses? The last two verses say, so verse 87 and 88, 38:87 and 38:88 say, in huwa. Okay, notice in 38:67, قُلْ huwa naba'un azim. It is a great news. And then in 38:87 he says, in huwa illa dhikrun lil alamin. It is only a reminder for all of the worlds. وَلَا تَعْلَمُنَّ نَبَأَهُ بَعْدَ حِينٍ, and you will know its news after a time. Because by definition, the naba of it, of the Quran, is something you're not familiar with because it's always unfolding. Even though we have the Quran, but the naba, the news that comes continuously from it is something that will continually unfold throughout all time. So you will know it's news after a time. But look at those connections. The first verse starts off saying, "Wal Qur'ani the adhikr," and the last verse says, "In huwa illa dhikrun." Second to last verse, "In huwa illa dhikrun lil alamin." It is only a dhikr for all the worlds. "Wala ta'lamunna naba'ahu," and it calls it naba. And in that surah, in verse 67, he says, "Qul huwa naba'un azim." It is a great news. So based on those connections, and Allah knows best, my conclusion is that an-naba'ul azim, the great news, is talking about the Quran. Amma yatasa'alun 'anil naba'il azim alladhi hum fihi mukhtalifun. What are they asking? About the great news. The Quran is the great news. Alladhi hum fihi mukhtalifun, about which they are differing. They're differing about it, right? So inshallah, this is our first video about Juz Amma, and inshallah stay tuned for the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.